Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Bell, and I am extremely honored to be with you here today to discuss this wonderful production called The Mountaintop, a review of Dr. King's legacy. And today I have numerous leaders in our community, Black leaders in our community, who are doing amazing things as well. And we're going to have a wonderful discussion, not only about the production, but about Dr. King's legacy. But before we begin, I would like to start with an acknowledgement. We are proud to call Manitoba home. Land acknowledgement is one small act of reconciliation that recognizes the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples who called the land home before it was stolen from them. Therefore, we respect, honor, and recognize that we are speaking today on the lands of Treaty 1 territory, traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabeg, Oceti-Sakowin Sioux, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We are thankful for the benefits this land has afforded us, and we are committed to the responsibilities of the treaty. In regards to the Mountaintop, Director Audrey Dwyer writes in her inspirational program notes, she believes that at the heart of the Mountaintop is transformation. Katori Hall, who's the playwright, isn't simply just asking us to remember times past. Looking back at Dr. King's time with romanticism and nostalgia is not her aim. She's asking us to examine our connection to the world that we currently live in. Ms. Hall challenges us to consider our relationships to justice, love, and the human connection and condition while engaging with the past. Because yes, we know so much has changed, and if we look around, we can plainly see that too much has remained the same. So she is hoping, and we are all hoping, that the Mountaintop will illuminate what we can do to bring more justice and love into this world through action. With that, I am so excited to speak with each of you today, and I will call upon you to introduce yourself with a few words, as well as explain your connection with the civil rights movement right here in Winnipeg. And I'll start with Markus.
Markus Chambers, I'm the City Councillor for St. Robert, St. River. I've been elected to office since October of 2018. And I'm proud to be on this panel and to share my experiences since being elected and how it relates to our Black community and the community at large. So excited to participate and to hear the comments of the other co-presenters.
Thank you. Chim.
Hi, my name is Chimwemwe Undi. You can call me Chim, everyone does. I'm a poet and a writer living on Treaty 1 territory here in Winnipeg. And I'm also an artifying student, so not quite a lawyer, but I'm getting there. I'm not an elected official. I guess I'll say my connection to the civil rights movement in Winnipeg is really through my writing and my connection to the community generally.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Uzoma.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you folks. Really happy to be here participating on this panel. Yeah, I'm an MLA. I represent the constituency of Union Station. So as an MLA, I represent the core of downtown Winnipeg at the provincial level of government. My pronouns are they, them. I use neutral pronouns. And my connection to the civil rights activism in Winnipeg is pretty, I would say for me personally, significant. I do identify as a community organizer and an activist. I've been an organizer in Winnipeg in our communities for a number of years before going into politics. And it's a privilege to be able to do that work alongside incredible people in our communities who fight really, really hard up against incredibly challenging barriers in order to advance equity for all of us, and especially obviously equity for those who are targeted and marginalized. Mm-hmm. And so I feel really, really privileged not only to have done that work, to be connected to amazing people doing that work, but to bear witness to the young folks in our communities, our Black communities who have really risen up in the last year, year and a half, and have just taken it upon themselves to be the proponents of much needed change.
Absolutely. It has been wonderful to watch. The evolution has been amazing to be a part of and to participate in, and I echo your sentiments, absolutely. I do want to start with a quote from Dr. King, one of my favorites. It's very simple, but it's very poignant at the same time. The quality, not the longevity of one's life is most important. And so I ask you, what quote from Dr. King speaks most to you? Jim.
Sure. I think a lot in my writing, my poetic writing, and also other kinds of writing, about Dr. King's call to the white liberal who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers tranquility to equality. This, for me, ties into John Lewis's idea of good trouble. There are some feathers that you will ruffle and pluck if we're ever going to get free.
Yes. Thank you. Uzoma.
I think the quote that really, especially in the last many months, that comes to mind for me, and I apologize if I don't get it exactly right, but it is not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. That really resonates with me, especially now, because, you know, we need for folks to raise their voices. We need as many people as possible who identify themselves as people who recognize the impacts of anti-Black racism to make their voices heard and to act based on the injustice that they and all of us identify taking place in our communities. And so I think that, especially in the last many months, rather, really resonates with me.
Thank you. Markus.
Yeah, I guess the quote that really resonates with me is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think it speaks to complacency. I think it speaks to the fact that if we let injustices go, they will fester and you know, become a bigger part of our society. So we can't leave them unchecked. We have to attack them and make sure that we are doing everything to recognize what the potential for injustice will be in the larger scale. When I look in the last 4 years of what the United States has gone through and what has started to emanate here in Canada with respect to social injustice, we have to take up cause and ensure that we are attacking, you know, those things that go against our basic rights and freedoms. And racism is one of those things that if we leave it unchecked, it's going to affect everybody.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen it time and time again. And here we are in 2021, and we still have the stories coming out of numerous organizations, et cetera. And so we know there is work to do. I'm just so happy that in the last little while, really many people have stepped up in that regard from an ally perspective as well to stand on the front lines. This play, this production, The Mountaintop, is a reimagination of the night before Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And in the play, we witness the hope and the struggle of a man confronting his destiny and his legacy to the people. And so here we are in Black History Month. What can we as Canadians take away from learning about civil rights history? And what do you think is Dr. King's legacy as we speak today? I will say Markus.
Well, of course, the legacy of Dr. King is the nonviolent nature of his protests. You know, he was effective in utilizing, you know, love as a weapon to fight for equality. Out of that legacy did come the Civil Rights Act of 1965 that was passed by President Johnson. So I would state that there were many activists at the time that were using or utilizing different methods of trying to reach social justice. But Dr. King's legacy of nonviolent intervention in terms of his protest march and using love, I think really speaks to his legacy. And, that he got that from Gandhi, he got that from Henry David Thoreau, and these were all parts that he picked to advance the cause of Black people in the United States throughout the 50s and 60s.
Thank you. Chim.
I'm thinking about, hopefully I can articulate this well, I'm thinking about the idea of a legacy and the fact that history is an archive. So it's inherently man-made, and we have to understand that Dr. King's legacy is, for that reason, inherently incomplete. So in addition to being a civil rights leader, he was a father and a son, and he played football and he sang in a choir. And I say that not to humanize a man who's already so human, but to complicate our idea of what an activist is and what an activist looks like. Also in this play, we see Dr. King struggle with and against his legacy, and the notion that it was not easy for him to do the right thing, but he did anyway. I think that's something that we really need to think about as Canadians, that what is right is often not easy, particularly when it means confronting your own anti-Blackness and things that you've been indoctrinated into that you, if told explicitly, would say you don't agree with, but that live inside your biases and your assumptions about how the world works.
And what we were indoctrinated into and never learned in school. I darn sure did not. And it's one of those things where I feel now my duty is for my children to learn these things and to learn them in a way that is practical so that they can see and apply it as they go on through their own lives. It's, I just get emotional when I think about that, because I think, I wasn't in school that long ago. But at the same token, it's still not, when we talk about civil rights history and learning it, it's still not happening in the way it should. Uzoma, would you like to jump in on this conversation here?
Yeah, when I think about, I'll speak specifically to the legacy. When I think about Dr. King's legacy, what I actually have been thinking a lot about lately is the ways in which people can rewrite and reframe a narrative. It's interesting to me that a lot of the photos we see of that time are in black and white, when photos were obviously being taken in color. And now we're seeing a lot of people show that aspect of the civil rights movement, showing those photos in color. And the different internal reactions and connections we have when we see things illustrated in the full context of what people were wearing at the time, what Black people were, how they chose to style themselves, and what their smiles really look like, in the color of the brilliance of their skin actually being shown outside of these black and white photos that we typically have been met with throughout our lives, me certainly. And it makes me think about the ways in which people use Dr. King's words now and talk about his approach to activism now, and tend to erase the fact that he was nonviolent but met with so much violence. Mm-hmm. That the reality of what he was up against, what the movement was up against, regardless of the nonviolent approach and narrative, was so much violence. Mm. And the erasure of that truth perpetuates this misconception that people who are activists, who are on the side of right, are not in fact met with incredible levels of violence. And so, I think that it's really important for us, when we talk about his legacy, to also talk about the realities outside of him being murdered, the violence, all of the violence he navigated leading up to that moment. And the fact that he survived all of that violence. Mm. leading up to that moment. I think we need to also be able to talk about the legacy of the realities of what it means to rise up against, and the ways in which we have to demand justice throughout whatever that process looks like.
And not dilute it.
Good point there, Uzoma, when you say rise up against. And that rise up against looks different for different people. When I look at the Black Lives movements that took place in 2000, subsequent to the murder of George Floyd, and then I look at the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021, it looked completely different. Although they were, very active and passionate, what it looked like for the Black Lives movement was more of a military operation than it was the storming of the Capitol. That looked more facilitative when they were trying to, get into the House of Representatives and the Senate. So again, when you say rise up against, it looks different for different people, and in the United States for obvious reasons. So that's duly noted as well.
If I can jump in, this is, it's funny, this is a topic that I thought a lot about while doing my master's degree in critical discourse analysis, and my thesis actually talked about the context that violence exists in that case. I was talking about the violence in apartheid South Africa, and that sort of speaks to both Uzo and Markus's points about what violence means in its context. We can't talk about violence, and not to bring this conversation to being suddenly all about violence, but we can't talk about people reacting violently to being subjugated every single day of their life, for generations of their life, being treated like animals, like property, like less than human. We cannot compare that to violence that is arising from people having privilege that is unearned and that is built on the backs of marginalized people. We can't compare that violence to the kind of violence that, we can't compare those two kinds of violence, rather. And so I think that context is everything. That's just the truth of it.
Absolutely. And not a trendy social media trend either, which I have found it seems to be the case these days. In his final speech in the play, The Mountaintop, Dr. King says about the fight for civil rights, "Your time is now. I tell you now. The baton may have been dropped, but anyone can pick it back up. I don't know where in the race we are, but pick up that baton and pass it along." My question to you is, how do you think that we as a community are picking up the baton in Winnipeg? And is there any particular organization or any people that you can think of right now, other than yourselves, that you would love to share so that folks can hear? Chim looks like she's about to say something, so I pick you.
Great, I'll go. I'll say that in Dr. King's time and right now, the civil rights movement, the movement for Black lives, however you call it, has been driven by Black women and Black queer people. I would shout out Uzo if they weren't here. I see them speaking truth to power every day, using their voice to uplift Black people in an institution that is fundamentally not built for us. And seeing that really means a lot to the Black people, to me as a Black person, and to the Black people in my life. And of course, the folks from Justice for Black Lives Winnipeg, who organized that historic march and who are still collecting funds for mutual funds. And so if folks showed up on that one day and walked to the Forks and back, I would encourage them to stay connected to the work that that organization is doing, because the necessity has not dissipated.
Thank you. Markus, you were about to speak, sorry.
Yeah, for me, just seeing how our youth have been activated in taking up the social causes that we saw during the summer. I mean, that is completely encouraging to know that they're willing to be disruptors, to fight against the system, They've been activated. It's a yearning within them. So I'm excited to see that happening. It does bring us back to the struggles of the 50s and 60s and the movements that we had back then. In this Black History Month, just noting that there has been more discussion. I've been working with the Black History Manitoba Celebration Committee and going from school to school, and just seeing the level of engagement and discourse that they're having. They're really having really strong and deep and meaningful conversations about anti-racism and about unconscious bias and all of those institutionalized practices that seek to marginalize people of color. And they're saying enough already. This is 2021. And why are we still having these conversations and wanting to be part of a system that eradicates it fully? And so I'm really encouraged to see that they've been activated, that they're working, that they're talking, that they're educating themselves and moving forward. So if there is anything that, in terms of the baton that's being passed, it has been passed squarely in their hands, and they're taking it and they're running with it. So great to see.
Thank you. Uzoma, would you like to add?
Absolutely. And I want to thank Chim for your acknowledgement. That's very generous of you, and I appreciate that. It really stands out to me. Justice for Black Lives Winnipeg obviously stands out. I think that collective of folks really represents what activism within Black communities has looked like for a long time in ways, and in an unapologetic manner, and in a manner that really centers community and really centers unapologetically the needs of all Black people, which to me is critically important now. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, we have to mean that all Black lives matter. And that's something that we don't talk about enough now when we reflect on the legacy of movements, the fact that a lot of the labor of women, a lot of the labor of queer and trans Black people was erased during those times. And it is so beautiful and important to now see that those identities being celebrated within our movements, and those identities not being erased from the historical record of activism that is taking place. And so I'm really proud of folks making sure that they're driving the narrative of what their activism looks like, the demands that they're placing on others who access what it is that they're creating, the demands that they're placing on community members who show up and how they engage and participate, I think is really powerful. And I'm especially inspired by the artists. I'm especially inspired by the poets like Chim. There's a number of folks I think of locally. I think of Cyrus Marcus Ware, who's not in Winnipeg, out in Toronto, but the artists and the creators who leave a whole other kind of legacy in terms of their activism and what it contributes to the movements of today. And so, specifically here in Winnipeg, I think that the activism we're seeing covers so many areas, which is so important. It's so important that it is artists. It's so important that it is politicians. It's so important that it is community grassroots organizers and organizations. It's so important that it is educators like Michelle Jean-Paul and Sherry Jones. It's so important that, it's athletes. It's so important that everyone across the spectrum in all of these areas are doing the work, because at the end of the day, we're all interconnected. And injustice in one area is not separate from injustice in another area. And so it inspires me, and it lifts my spirits up, and it reinstills hope every single time I see somebody in this city, in this province, stepping up, and in whatever level of capacity they possess, doing what they can to advance the Black community. And that means all members of our Black communities.
Agreed. I was just thinking to the youth, because everyone's speaking about the youth, and the Justice for Black Lives group are this mixture of people who are coming from different areas, different educational institutions. And I'm seeing that throughout all social media, the University of Manitoba, the high schools, the junior high schools. Never could have imagined seeing that before. And so that influence and how it's just trickling down into those areas it's wonderful to see and wonderful to watch. And
if I can add,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a small thing that I've been thinking about and wanted to add are the people that I call the auntie activists, the people who raised us, who came to Winnipeg, to Manitoba before these conversations were ever happening, who endured microaggressions, regular aggression, who worked in institutions that did not turn their mind to them at all, and at whose feet I learned that I matter and that I have value. And that kind of activism is also very, very important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chim, for saying that. Yeah, those people are so important. It's, yeah, like I think of Auntie Kenny, Auntie TT, to Janet. Yeah, like, we all know who they are. They're legends. They're sheroes. They're the living giants whose shoulders we stand upon. Thank you for, yeah.
Thanks for that. It's been 8 months since the rally here in Winnipeg, and it seems like it just happened, honestly. Uzoma, you spoke at the event and you said, and I believe this is a direct quote, "To be an ally, you must action your allyship and your commitment to our community in everything that you do every single day." So powerful. So when you think about allyship and some of the ways that we can continue to bring that anti-racism conversation and those actions in our lives, what does that look like? I'll start with you, Uzoma.
Sure. When I made that statement, I was really coming from the place of how important it is to not only be reflective, but to be critical of why you think what you think, you feel how you feel, you do what you do, you say what you say, you action what you action. And so I wanted for non-Black people who showed up that day, who were having those conversations, who posted on their social media, who held up those signs, who put up their fists and said, Black Lives Matter, right? I wanted for those people to recognize the importance of being accountable to your supposed commitment, and to recognize that you have to be able to be critical of the decision-making that is attached to that commitment. And that decision-making is not just about showing up at a rally. It is about the decisions we make on a daily basis, about where we buy our coffee, about how, whether or not we linger and watch and pay attention, if we see an interaction with a non-Black person and a Black person that maybe we think that Black person might need some support. It's all of these things that I think people need to evaluate, not only in terms of how they want to be anti-racist, but also in terms of how they may be, in fact, perpetuating racism. And making that commitment, that recommitment on an everyday basis. So I wanted to put that out there because we're in a time where I know people are going to make mistakes. Maybe you're not going to get it perfect or always get it right, but we're in a time where we need people to really be critical thinkers and to commit to recommitting all of the time, because unfortunately, people are still dying. Systems are still killing Black people. And the only way that will change is not if Black people do any more than Black people have been doing. It's if non-Black people start doing the heavy lifting that has been outlined and illustrated by Black people from time.
And engaging in that emotional intelligence to recognize that you will be uncomfortable, you will feel discomfort, and it will feel horrible. And you need to be intelligent enough to recognize that at the same time. Jim, did you want to?
I would just echo that. I'll obviously thought about this and wrote about it for the CBC about the performance of allyship versus the living of allyship. And allyship happens in secret. It happens at meetings where there's not a Black person at the table. It happens at brunch when you're with your friends and somebody says something. It will make you uncomfortable, and it's hard, and that sucks, but it also is hard and sucks to be killed. So that's where we're at, frankly.
And you know, it's an important distinction as well. You know, as I said earlier in the quote that resonated with me, injustice anywhere is the threat to justice everywhere. We have to recognize and join forces with those other groups that have been marginalized as well. When I look at the rise of anti-Semitism throughout North America, that we've got to take up arms with, you know, whether it's faith-based in terms of our Jewish community or Islamophobia, you know, taking up arms with our members of our Islamic community, our homophobia, taking up arms with those from the LGBTQ communities, and saying that if I stay silent as a result of what's happening around me, even though it's not happening to me, it's like perpetuating and letting it happen. So it is an injustice, and we need to recognize that we're all in it together and join forces against any type of racism that's out there, whether it's against gender, whether it's against race, whether it's against religion, and make sure that we're working together to eradicate it.
And we're in solidarity.
And of course, we know that those oppressions happen, that people live at those intersections, and those people living at those intersections experience multiple different kinds of those oppressions at an elevated level.
Right. You know, this has been, I wish there was more time to speak about this, because I think we're just scratching the surface here and could speak all night if we could. However, just to close off with everything we've spoken about already this evening, and you know, the thought process of what we have going into the future as we hang up this Zoom call today, what are some of those parting thoughts that you would like to leave with all of us, everyone who is going to watch and listen? Uzoma, I'll start with you.
I just really want for Black people, all Black people, to know how loved you are and we are. You know, Black people are just so, I get emotional, to be completely honest, when I think about how deeply I love Black people, how proud I am of our people and our communities. It makes me really emotional when I think about what we continue to endure and how we thrive and shine and celebrate and lift other people up and lift one another up, and how we create and generate and protect, how fierce the most targeted within our communities are, how fierce and resilient and generous and loving and affirming those members of our community are. It brings me to tears. It makes me emotional. And I want for us to always know and to be rooted in how incredible we are, and how much good and love and respect and dignity we deserve, that we are worthy of the greatness that we are. And so I want for people to be rooted in that. I want for us to be rooted in our greatness, and especially for young folks, all Black young folks, to know how seen and loved they are.
You're gonna make me cry. Oh, every single time. Markus, would you like to leave us with some parting thoughts, please?
Yeah, and just to build on what Uzoma said, I mean, take the time to educate yourself as to our history, the accomplishments that we've made with humble beginnings and simple means. There is so much rich history there. When I look at the United States economy, in the early 1700s and 1800s was built on the backs of slaves. And, you know, it's something that, although it should have never have happened, it's a testament to our fortitude that even being enslaved people, we've been able to overcome. We built the world's biggest economy, and that shouldn't go unnoticed. Even though we were enslaved at the time, it was the strength of our people that did that. And as we move forward, we have to learn about our history, and I think that will guide us to a stronger place, our youth to a stronger place as we move forward, whether it's here in North America or throughout the world. We have to learn our history. Learn where we came from will point us to where we're going.
Thank you. Chim.
I'm like still choked up from
I know.
Uzo. And I want to reiterate, I marvel constantly at what Black people have been able to build with what we've been given and what we have taken and what has been taken from us. But I also think I'm obviously so honored to be invited to these kinds of things, to be seen as a Black leader. But I want to reiterate at every opportunity that even the least of us, the ones with nothing, who have not been able to overcome the obstacles in front of us, even those lives matter. All of us do. Even those of us who are not able to be elected to office or to sit in shiny offices or to host panels and be media superstars, all of us matter fundamentally. And that is what Dr. King fought for, and that is what we are fighting for.
And we are more than enough. More than enough. I thank you all so very much for your time to speak about this. I hope all of Winnipeg and whoever else outside of Winnipeg can watch the Mountaintop for the next couple of weeks as it airs and really embrace what we are trying to continue to do on behalf of Dr. King. So again, thank you so much for your time. Until we meet again.